Live and alive. That's right, living the life. Hello, folks. Good evening. How you guys doing? So, tonight's class is titled My Signature to Success, or Signature to Success. You got to learn how to sign your name. I wonder, is there going to be a time where you don't have to learn how to sign your name anymore? Remember the days you used to sit and sign your name? Our signature. Today's signature is less about signing your name. It's like your signature moment. You know, like what is your signature moment? It's not even 15 minutes of fame anymore. That's random at best. So now it's like your signature moment, something you rely on, something you get back to. And talk about this tonight. So I hope everyone's doing well and is ready for a great month ahead. For those who contributed on our Giving Tuesday, thank you. We appreciate it. As a 501c3, we earned that status by not earning anything. That's how that works. So we appreciate people who give and are a part of our growth and success. Thank you. So tonight we're going to continue this conversation that we've been having the last 3 weeks. This would be number 4 on the topic of success and having different things to bring towards the forefront of, like, how do I live a successful life? And more importantly, living a successful life means how am I happy and excited about the life that I live and the person that I am. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit more about that, whereas the first 3 times we spoke about success, kind of learning to define it and being able to think positively as a constant source of thinking success. And last week we went a little further in the conversation and we discussed how being a creative person is in something you're endowed with. Being endowed with the ability to be creative is also the ability to spark your own form of success by having your own creative solutions to your issues. But tonight we want to take this a little further and talk a little bit about actually identifying tools within yourself that you could always get on track and be able to identify the things that you already have, which should be indicators towards living a successful life. So let's get on with it. Let's do this. Let's talk about being successful. And more importantly, let's talk about us. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about what you're made of. Below this video is a video I posted from YouTube, and we're going to refer to it shortly. You're welcome to pause and look at it when we get there. Done and done. All right. So Judaism has an age-old adage. I double-checked online. It is sort of appropriate to say age-old adage. You could just say adage. It means old, but you know. Anyways, so age-old adage. And what is it? It is that every person is different than everyone else, that there's no 2 people alike. And just like there are no 2 people alike, there is no 2 things created by God alike. So neither in the animal kingdom, nor in the vegetative kingdom, nor in the mineral kingdom. So being that nothing is the same, so how does anything know what it is? How does it identify what it's all about? So the age-old adage in Judaism is that it looks to its instincts as indicators to the kind of being that it is. So a dog isn't just the domesticated version of a good pet for a human being. It is the pinnacle animal that is able to, there's somebody else coming in. It is the pinnacle being that is able to be man's best friend, for example. Trial and error, I would say. At some point, human beings went through trial and error. What's the best pet? Obviously, it comes with its own faults, its own challenges. But at the end of the day, its tendencies allow us to know the kind of being it is and how that works for us as a great lifestyle situation. And same for the human being. Human beings have, at the end of the day, have identities that they know themselves. I'm quick to be a certain kind of person. I'm short-fused, or I like being compassionate, or I'm attracted to certain ideas. We know ourselves just a little bit, but do we ever sit down and really think about who that it is and what that person is in order to really grow and add? So the human being, it may be hard to figure out who the human being is and what type of person you are. But when you look at your God-given talents and you look at your God-given temperament, the kind of person you are, you can call it your genetic temperament, but it's definitely your God-given talents. Where do they show up from? But when you get that, that's when you really have to start asking yourself, are these strengths that I have or talents that I have just convenient? or are they indicators to the kind of person I am? That's what I'd like to talk about a little bit tonight. There is a joke, and the joke is a age-old Jewish joke, and it's Yankele gets hired as a salesperson, and he writes in, when they say you accept a job, now they're going to work out terms of the finances for his new job. So he asks an exorbitant amount for his paycheck. And the guy calls him in and he says, listen, I liked you, so I hired you. But in reality, you don't have a track record as a salesperson. And here you are, not only you don't have experience as a salesperson, you're asking for a ton of money. So he said, like a good Jew, Yankel answers, well, I asked for a lot of money because it's going to be very hard for me to do sales. So I figured as much. At the end of the day, a person sits down with himself. They sit at night, we talk about this in other lessons, they think about their day and what kind of person they are, and you start having indicators of the kind of person you are. And if you really care about yourself, you could start putting yourself in better positions for success. You start thinking about the conversations you should be having versus the ones you do. You start thinking about where to invest your energy versus where you're currently investing your energy. You start looking for the indicators of who I am and what are my strengths. And now you could start thinking about what success is, who I am, how to get there. So how are we supposed to identify these things? Well, today this is a big part of modern psychology, is being able to identify who I am and what I'm about. And we'll talk a little bit about the modern elements, but we can go all the way back to, there's a book called Chovavot Halabavot, which in English is known as Duties of the Heart. It's a very popular book. As far as like when people are looking for spiritual growth, they feel spiritually empty. It's a book that you'll see a lot of people hand out. I've never handed it out. My favorite book to hand out when people are looking for meaning is a book called Toward a Meaningful Life. That's my personal favorite. It's built on the principles of the Chabad Rebbe. It's very contemporary and new age. Chovavot Halabavot was written in the 11th century, so it's been around to say the least, and it's built on the 1,000 years before it. And what it considered its modern times. It was in Spain, which was quite the modern country at that time, before the Inquisition. So this Chovavot Halabavot is written, talks about the character development of the human being, and how sometimes you have to look to your own characters as not something that get in the way, but something that inspires you to see who you are. And I'll just read a piece of it over here. In your student textbooks, it's on page 96. I'm reading the last paragraph over here. Similarly, you will find character traits and bodily structures among human beings suited to certain businesses or occupations. If your nature and personality are attracted to a certain occupation and your body is suited for it and can bear its demands, you should pursue it. Make it your means of earning a livelihood and bear its pleasures and pains. This is quite a modern text, It doesn't sound like something that's over 1,000, that's several hundred years old. And partly the reason why it's so successful as a book is because this is a very active space to read. It's not like this passive line where I read it and I think back. I read it, I'm like, but of course, if only I took the job that suited my skill set and the kind of person I was versus the job that I thought would bring the most money to me, what kind of person would I be? Without names, and of course that's not the point here, there was a person, and there is a person, part of our community, a beautiful soul, who for the longest time had a job they did not like. And you know what? At a certain point, the job and them would come to an impasse. And now, just a couple of years afterwards, the impasse happened. Now he has the job that he always wanted to have. And he is a police officer in the great city of San Francisco. And I always think about him all the time. I don't get to see him as much because his job is really a difficult one. But at the same time, knowing he's out there and happy and joyful and experiencing the kind of job that I think he always really wanted to have versus the finance one that he put himself through was always very inspiring to me. I always felt like it's something I could share with people to say, like, joy is something that needs to be a status. And if you're not happy, sometimes it's not anything but I'm not using my actual talents. I'm not using myself the way I should. Everybody else gets to use me, but am I using myself? Am I putting myself in the right position for success? So that's where Chovavot Halabavot really fits in. In today's day, here's how the modern language looks. This is from a psychologist, Marcus Buckingham. He writes very often. Marcus Buckingham writes in the New York Times and other places. He wrote a book together with Donald Clifton called Discover Your Strengths, How to Develop Your Talents and Those in the People You Manage. And here's a paragraph where he writes on page 97 in your books, to excel in your chosen field and to find lasting satisfaction in doing so, you will need to understand your unique patterns. You will need to become an expert at finding and describing and applying and practicing and refining your strengths. That's a lot right there. He's not saying like that it happens. He's saying it's describing, applying, practicing, and refining. It includes the full gamut of time, effort, and energy to figure out who you are, what you're about, and to learn how to look to yourself for guidance. You don't always have to look in other places to be inspired. Sometimes you look to your own strengths and you can be inspired by your capabilities, which you're really worthy of doing in this world. No one is holding you back. It's true as life goes on, and if you have a family to support and people are relying on you, you may say that I'm not being fulfilled in my job, so I got to at least say I'm making the money I need and I'm using my free time wisely. I'm feeding myself in my free time. All right, there are other opportunities. But in reality, most people don't take enough time learning to discover who they are and what they're about. And this is an important idea, and that is now we see in a modern setting, but more importantly, this has always been the Judaism point of the world, is that everybody's different, so you got to learn to identify who you are and what you're about. There are a couple of ways to identify your strengths, and I want to talk about a little bit about that now. But before I do, I'd like to share a little story. The story goes as follows. It's a classic tale in Hasidic circles of an individual who is a wealthy businessman and a gentleman who is a coachman. And they both have their strengths and their weaknesses. On the front, one doesn't really get his hands dirty. He's involved in finance and business. And the other one's a coachman. He greases the wheels, literally and figuratively. Now comes this one Shabbat that the coachman decides he'd like to get to synagogue earlier than usual. So he goes and he's trying to get his stuff all together, but the coachman never gets to synagogue on time. You know, by the time he parks it and by the time he gets his horses in the stable and he gets ready, he's never able to get to synagogue on time. Now the rich man, the businessman, the quote, the not getting his hands dirty, every time right before Shabbat, he's already finished, he's dressed, he goes to synagogue. So when they get to synagogue, the businessman is always there first, so he's always inviting all the people, the poor people there for dinner. Back in the shtetl, very common that many people in the synagogue didn't have food at home or were travelers. It was a tough time for the Jews. And they were able to figure it out by simply put, I didn't have to know who you are. You're Jewish, you're in synagogue Friday night, come to my house, join me for dinner. Something we try to practice till today. I got to witness my dad on many occasions pulling people in the synagogue that we've never seen before and bringing them in and to dinner in the house. Every seventh family has that family that has all the randos at their table, but you know, that's who we are. We got to give people a space and people a home. So this one particular week, on the way to synagogue, you know, here we have this businessman is on his early way, and somebody is driving a wagon and it breaks, the wheel breaks, and the guy says, hey, can you help me out? And he says, you know, this week, instead of getting on time and inviting everybody home, let me try my hands at helping this guy with the wheel. So he starts helping him with the wheel, but of course, the more he helps, the worse it gets. Not really good at this. And by the time he's ready to go to synagogue, after he, quote, didn't help, he has to go home and get cleaned up. Meanwhile, the coachman, he gets to synagogue late, but guess what? Nobody invited any of the guests yet. So he invites everybody's house. He's so excited. He finally gets to have all these guests at his house. He brings them home. Problem is, he doesn't really have much food. So he's able to split the food amongst the people, and it's not the greatest of evening for food-wise, but it's wonderful. Whereas the businessman gets the synagogue, everybody already has a place to eat. He goes home and he has tons of food. And the adage over here that Hasidism would put together, or the parable here that they would give with this story is, it's not that they didn't do good things. They both did a great thing. They both were trying to help. They were both doing what they were supposed to do. But if the coachman would have walked to shul a minute later and the businessman would have said, listen, that's not my place. I got to go get all those people so I can invite them to my house, make sure they have where to eat. A minute later, the coachman would have been by and he would have helped that guy in a cinch, and vice versa with the food. This is not anything but imagine that there are things that we want to do that we feel like we didn't do, and there are things that we do that we want to do. The only way to really take it down and really say is, can I really help? Where can I really help? Where do I really have what to give? Sometimes it's money you have. Sometimes it's physical labor. Sometimes it's time. Everybody has somewhere to contribute. And now we're not even talking about in their society. We're talking about as your life on earth, you have something unique that you could contribute that is waiting for you to do. And don't worry, unlike the parable, nobody's going to take your greased wheel. All right, in this story, I'm the coachman, grease the wheel. And in that case, we're all available to that. So I want to just use this as an idea that You have talents and you have a scenario waiting for you, and you don't have to worry that you're going to end up being in the wrong place if you learn to identify your strengths. When you identify your strengths, you end up constantly finding good opportunities for you to figure out what you're about and who you are. So the little basic thing to figure out your signature strength is, number one, to take an account of what's my knowledge base. You really want to think about what type of knowledge I have. You also want to think about what my talents, what are my raw talents, not what I've developed. What comes natural to me? What's easy for me? Some people it's to cook, some it's to clean, some people it's to write. There's always something, right? There's always something that everybody could contribute. What's your natural base talent? Those need to be developed, but at the same time, they're indicators to what field you could really apply yourself to. And then we talk about skills. Skills is different than talent in this case. Talent is like my natural capacity. Skills are my natural way of applying it. So whereas my talent, you could have a raw talent, but your skill is that you've applied it already. You're able to think this way. So having skills, having talents, having knowledge, these are things that everybody has. And whatever you have, that's enough to start this process of who am I and what can I really do with those. So in order to move the topic of success forward, we really need to think about, am I truly identifying my strengths? How am I supposed to identify my strengths? The Talmud has this idea that a person should learn the things that they want to learn. And when you go to school, you don't learn everything you want to learn. A lot of what they teach you in school is not what you want to learn. I was lucky to have a dad who would always ask me, "Bameh have zahir tvei," which means, in what do you feel connected to the most? And in this case, zahir means what is most important to you, or what is the most illuminating to you. And my dad would ask that to me all the time, and I realized that he would never really ask me how I did on my tests. He asked me more about where would I apply myself. And I really like that, especially now growing up later in life and using it now on my own children and figuring out where do I like to apply myself. So I know in the places that they struggle with, they still got to get the work done, but that's not where they want all their skills and tutoring. In essence, if you get to accentuate their good parts, this is not for parenting purposes necessarily, this is just one idea. So my dad, to back it up, he made our family a bill at the bookstore. A lot of families in this community, they would have a family bill at the marketplace. You know, get food, you want to go and get a snack. Our family didn't have it at the marketplace, we had it at the bookstore. And that's true, I don't know how the weight came anyways, but the bookstore I used frequently. I was able to go in anytime I want, any book, any topic I wanted to read, just pop in. One of the great forms of gratitude I have for my dad is giving us that option, which we used all the time. Never once heard a complaint. No matter what I bought, no matter how many books I bought, it was never a complaint. We'd go in and pay the bill and we just keep on going. It was wonderful. So this idea that a person should learn what they like is the same idea with everything in life. It's not do what I like. I do what I like. No, it's learning to identify what you truly like and then bringing all the spirituality and learning and growth to that and watch everything else also start developing. So learning to identify yourself is not so much know yourself as much as it is to know what is the inlet to a successful mindset. Where do I begin from? Where do I really gather energy from? And that's an important feature for the kind of person that you need to be. So if we started off with our first conversation a few weeks ago of learning to define success is important, and then we went into the idea of adopting a successful mindset. Last week we even said being created in the image of God is the idea being that you are the creative image. You are a creative person. If you are created, that you have creativity in yourself, and learning to accentuate your creativity allows you to really tap in to the kind of person you are. Today it's about identifying the kind of energy I'm attracted to, the kind of things that I am, and ask, are we developing those parts of ourselves? Now, I don't want to call it secular, but in the secular text that we read, the ways to identify yourself is through knowledge, through your talents, through your skills. And that's beautiful stuff. But when you look to Judaism, that's a much deeper way of identifying who you are and what you're about. And that is what I want to kind of focus on going now. How does Judaism have a person identify their strengths and the kind of person that they are? It's very easy to identify your weaknesses because they find themselves right in front of you. I said the wrong thing. I did the wrong thing. I was in the wrong space. I didn't execute on that. The failures seem to show up, as they say in sports. They always remember the losses. But maybe that's because we don't work hard enough to identify the win, to identify where we really find ourselves. So that is where we're going to lead the discussion right now. Any comments or questions to chime in? It's a good moment. No? Too deep. Go back. It's just, we're setting it forward. We're giving you the thinking material. How about online? How are we doing? Everybody good?
There is only one comment.
All right.
From Rabbi Mochkin, and it has a lot of emoticons, and then Teddy. I don't know what Teddy means. Taty.
That's my dad.
Oh,
he's
okay.
just very excited that he's part of the lesson tonight. Love you, Tal. So, what is the Jewish individual expression that Judaism wants you to identify? And by the Jewish expression, I mean, simply put, I hear from people now and again, isn't Kabbalah something you learn when you're 40? And maybe for centuries and for generations, Kabbalah was something that wasn't for the masses. But the Kabbalah that we learn today, and more importantly, the Hasidic values of Kabbalah that we live with today, are because Kabbalah is really, to a certain degree, the theological sophistication of Judaism. It's the mystical / nuclear construct of energy, like tapping into the source of energy for our universe and really seeing how it expands. And everything in this universe is built with what we call godly energy, just means, to be honest, an energy that is singular. That behind everything is a singular force, and that's why we're connected to our world and to the cosmos and to everything out there in that sense, because our connection is that we share the singular force behind us. But even within this singular force, it has to break up, because if it was all the same, then you wouldn't see even on the outside different expression. On the one hand, it's like there's a light, and you could put any shade on, and any lens on top of it and change the colors. Or today in Philips Hue technology, you change on your app to any color you want. It's still the same energy bringing light, so it's like that. But to a certain extent, it's even more than that, because the energy behind it that creates singular is not really identified unless you expose it, right? Until you talk about equality, no one's equal. Until in our world, until you do something for equality, you can't really believe that you're all equal. Like, what are you doing for that? You can't just say it and leave it to the birds. You have to actually live a certain way. Part of that experience is being able to tap into the singular force, is learning the individual force that you use as a key, major key alert, to tap into that space. So in that regards, when we talk about Kabbalah, what we're really talking about is the map to identify singular force energy, and on the way learn what you're about so you can identify that. So let's call it the discovery of self, but at the same time, when you discover yourself, you're really discovering the whole world. And in our day-to-day activity, it is, if I find my comfortable self, the one that I love, the one that I'm excited by, I end up being a better part of the world and really contributing to the world. So this is not just if I want to be successful or if I feel like I need to grow. This is actually something that needs to be part of your existence to really fulfill what you're all about. So don't worry about it. It's all good. So in this case, we'll talk about it like this. There's something called the 10 Sefirot. The 10 Sefirot are the 10 forces that make up all energy. During the time of Passover till Shavuot, I spend a lot of time talking about this because it encompasses the development of self, that is all about leaving slavery behind, and we'll get back to that later this year. Also below this video is a video giving a short description of the 10 Sefirot. I encourage you to pause your video and go check that out. And for you guys, we're going to do it right after we finish this conversation. We're going to go into the 10 Sefirot and break it down a little bit. Because the 10 Sefirot need a little bit of time. I'm just going to throw them out there right now and you'll go for that. The top three are Chachma, Bina, and Dat. Chachma is the source of information, wisdom that you possess. Bina is your understanding, and in other words, your formation of your information. And Das, we spoke about a couple weeks ago, is your application tool, your tolerance tool, your vehicle of taking your info and connecting it to the world around you. Then we start going more into emotive energy. The first would be chesed, kindness, and these are absolute terms. Kindness like absolute. And the second one is gevura, discipline, which is again absolute in strength, discipline, fear in that channel. And the third one is tiferet, which is compassion or beauty. And in this case already, it's not as absolute anymore. It's a combination of kindness and discipline is compassion, right? Doing kindness is anybody who asks for something, you give it to them. Having discipline in your kindness is somebody says they need money, but you can tell they need a sandwich. You walk in and get them a sandwich. That's your putting two and two together. Connecting the dots is your compassion, like Das is for your information. All right, can use a lot of time on that. But I want to kind of talk about so how does one identify which one is theirs the most? You have everything. You have wisdom, understanding, knowledge. You have kindness, strength, discipline, beauty. The next, by the way, are netzach, which means endurance or victory. You have hod, which is splendor, humility. And then yesod, foundation, or in this case, bonding as an emotive idea. And the seventh one and final of the 10 is malchut, which is influence or dignity or sovereignty. And these are the 10 spheres that a person deals with, what we call the 10 sfirot. And for Jewish people, knowledge, or like we said, skills, or like we said, talents, those are there to help you indicate an even deeper self. Like, what am I really? The Jewish people, for example, aspire to be compassion. Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, just like children are always curious, and Yisrael, the third of our forefathers, his dominant feature was compassion. We always want to be curious in our compassion, to constantly go a little deeper, find out how to blend all the things around us. But if you know that you're, for example, you have issues with your anger, or you have issues with patience, those aren't, I don't know if you noticed, I never mentioned those as part of your features. Those are features gone wrong. Those are when, like if you're a very disciplined person, but you're not disciplined enough to keep your discipline in, that when somebody else overcomes your discipline, you lose it, then you have to look at yourself and say, wait, I'm one part discipline, and that one part expresses itself in anger because I'm not taking control of that discipline that I have. So if you don't have an anger problem, but you have, let's say, a patience issue, you don't have patience for things, so you just constantly are going about that, probably you shouldn't be a teacher. Just saying, things like that. So everything in this world has its counterbalance. You could start learning who you are and what you're about and what you should do. And in this case, for us, in this class of Path to Success, how could one learn to identify which feature they are? So unfortunately, I can't do it for you guys on camera tonight. It's going to be for the people sitting here. But once you watch the video and you have a little bit of the grasp of those, feel free to send me any questions or comments afterwards, and I'll be able to point you in the right direction. But tonight, there is no shortcut, but there is some short. There's a little bit that I could do for everybody out there on how to identify the kind of person I am and how to accentuate my strengths. And I want to do a little bit of that now, so that way we can really at least leave with a tool to figure out what I'm about. All right? And again, we started off this whole conversation a few weeks ago with, how do I align my inner will and my outer will? My outer will being my life, what I do, everything about me, and my inner will meaning my inner desire, what I really would love to accomplish in this world. What, if I could dream, is really the kind of person I am, and not a job title or a successful money status, but like what I believe for the universe, making the world a better place, being a contributor, finding a space to really be me. So it's all about learning to align what I'm doing on the outside with who I really am on the inside. Biggest challenge is when people don't make that connection. So on the inside, I love you, but on the outside, I'm completely indifferent to your needs. That's not making that connection. If the inside is I love you, then the outside has to start expressing that. And the closer it's aligned, the better relationship you'll have, to say the least. What is the Jewish tool for connecting your outer will and your inner will? It's called a mitzvah. Now, oftentimes people call mitzvah a commandment, but mitzvah doesn't mean commandment. In fact, even the 10 commandments don't mean 10 commandments. The 10 commandments are actually aseret hadibrot, which are 10 sayings or 10 utterances. So I'm not sure where the commandments came from. It came from kind of where, People today have become completely neutral in all of the way they express themselves is not to offend anyone. So I understand the core as being for sensitivity, but there's still the lack of identification of what's happening over here. And maybe now we have to think about the right way to identify things. In Judaism, the right way to identify things is to connect the outside and the inside. Connect how the dignity of the inside needs to be felt versus the outside of what the reality is. Always a larger conversation going on in our heads as we talk. So I'm with you. So a mitzvah means connection. So everything that says in the Torah as a mitzvah is not a commandment, but is another way to connect to God. But there is another way to see a mitzvah, not just a connection from me to God, but me to myself. So we said that a person should learn what they like. Not because they don't need to know other things, but if they learn what they like, they'll learn to appreciate learning and the discovery of learning even more. A mitzvah as a connection, maybe it's important to have your mitzvah. Maybe a person needs to have their mitzvah. You know what I'm saying? So let me give you an example of the kind of person you are and the kind of mitzvah to put together. And I'm going to bring a famous example. The famous example is Hillel and Shammai. There are several stories that put these two characters in one boat and several hundred other conversations in the Talmud. Arguments in the Talmud. And Shammai is always on the stricter side and Hillel is always on the lenient side. So the famous story goes, somebody comes to Shammai and says, teach me the Torah on 1 foot. And the story always continues, even though no one really continues it, but there's several variations. One is that the person says, teach me the Torah on 1 foot. And he says, what I mean is, teach me the Torah, but none of the commentary. And Shammai says, there is no such thing as the Torah without commentary. So if you're not interested in the commentary, adios. The guy leaves, goes to Hillel, and Hillel says, what do you want, sir? Teach me the Torah on 1 foot. He says, love your fellow as yourself. The rest is commentary. Guy's so pumped, he goes and learns the commentary. Amazing moment. So most people take from this extreme scenario that Shammai, rough around the edges. He's that old sage. He's got all the wisdom, but he doesn't know how to connect to people. Hillel is not only wise, but kind and compassionate. But, according to the way we're talking tonight, that can't be the case. Because, in theory, Shammai is not a mean person. And my proof is simple. If he was mean, would the person then go to Hillel? Think about it. You ever went to a rabbi you didn't like? When was the next time you went to a rabbi? Right? Like, that's what happens. People get an idea of a religious person or a figurehead, and they're like, that's it, I'm out. But yet this person has no problem going to Shammai, and then has no problem right afterwards going to Hillel. And several people, the story repeats itself on several different occasions. One is somebody says, teach it to me without the, like we said, without the commentary. One says, teach it to me, but just tell me the essentials. There's all these different forms that a person wants to get in. And every time Shammai says the same thing. He's the hard sell and Hillel's the easy sell. And today, as I was preparing this topic, I said, you know what's really going on here? Shammai is actually super kind. Because the guy, this person who shows up, is also appreciative of how kind Shammai is. He just realizes that it's not the method that's going to work. Shammai says, my dominant feature is discipline. So we said number 1 is kindness. That's Hillel. Absolute. Sure, you want to learn with no strings attached? I got you covered. Right? Whereas Shammai is all discipline. Everything is strength and discipline and vigor. So when a person comes over, he says, sorry, no can do. I can't teach that way. But if you think about it, the person's not offended because the person realizes this is the real deal. This is not an individual who messes around. I know I don't have the mind space right now for all the information. I only have the mind space for this is what I want to know. What are you all about? Judaism, what are you all about? Torah, what's your deal? That's all I want to know. I want to be me. And I don't have time to learn everything, so what's me? And I bring up this example because if I'm not going to explain you all the 10 Sefirot and how to figure out which one is you and how to do it, so how do you identify you? How do you be you? And the way you do it is you learn to identify your mitzvah. So Shammai may be the person who's disciplined. But if you think about it, the only reason why this person can't learn is because our world has a hard time with very disciplined people. Few and far between have true discipline. In fact, maybe the world doesn't have space for strength and discipline in one way. Doesn't have the space. We're too broken a world right now. Or at that sense, it's true, Leonard Cohen, it's broken, that's where the light gets in. But that's not the optimal way. The optimal way is we all have light. The world shouldn't be a world where it has to be broken in order for us to feel like we're getting what we need out of it. It's hard enough to live your life. You don't need to break your leg on the way to work. So with this case, Shammai is just saying it like it is. The person's not taking offense to it. He just knows I can't accept that all the time. It's just too much. And in this case, he goes to Hillel, who's Hillel, all kindness, Hillel floods it. So we're not supposed to be Shammai or Hillel. You're not supposed to teach somebody Torah on one foot. You're supposed to tell them the best things that you have to offer. We're supposed to share all the great things we have with the people around us. But in reality, Shammai is just as kind in the sense, and the person knows it. And that's why he says, this is not good for my methodology, but I'm sure there's a rabbi out there who can engage me in the way I need to be engaged. And in that sense, Hillel fits the level perfect. That's why Jewish lineage has this amazing thing. When you learn Talmud, it's a legacy, it's a pedagogy, it's like this, it's like a woven thing of my heritage, my lineage, my upbringing, and also my academic integrity. Everything fits into the Talmud. And one of the things about the Talmud is that every single argument, sans 3, it goes according to Hillel, even though there's dozens and dozens of them. Yet it says when the Messiah comes, it's all going to switch according to Shammai. Because maybe the concept of a messianic world is a world when people really not only see eye to eye, but live harmoniously in our diversity. Imagine the whole world lived truly harmonious in their diversity. There'd be room for everyone to be disciplined. I'm disciplined because I need to be me. I need to be my version of me. I got to be the best person who I am. Thus, there's room for discipline to be a dominant feature in the human experience. Even now, it needs to be dominant. If you want to lose weight, you got to be disciplined. You want to be healthy, you got to be disciplined. You want to be good at your job, you got to have discipline. You want to be a good spouse, you got to be disciplined. Yet discipline is not at the forefront of people's existence. But in the future age, when people aren't concerned for the destitute because the society has found a way to, everybody contributes in making this world amazing, we believe we're helplessly optimistic as Jews. When that happens, we'll see the Shammai integrity in everything. A wonderful concept. So what does this mean? It means that today, in order to achieve this, a person needs to find a mitzvah, a connection, a way to connect to self. What is my mitzvah? So if you I do lots of things. I'm Jewish. I like to light Shabbat candles, or I put on tefillin on occasion, or things like that. But what is your mitzvah? When people say, what do you like to do? What is yours? And I think it's quite important for people to have a mitzvah that's really theirs. And I think if you start finding the mitzvah that's really yours, you'll start finding yourself too. Because you'll have to find something that you like, you appreciate, that really talks to you. And when you find something that talks to you, it really happens. Today you hear it with people giving charity. They like to give to a cause that talks to them. It's nice. That's nice. But what's your mitzvah? What's the thing that you do for you all the time? So people usually do for them ice cream or treat yourself kind of stuff. But what about your mitzvah? What is your source of expression to the universe? If you light Shabbat candles and you say, I identify with that, well, maybe you got to make that the best Shabbos candle lighting of all time. Bigger candles at the right time when Shabbat comes in, and like that becomes your moment. It'll accentuate all the things that make it happen. If yours is challah baking, do you take the piece of challah and make a blessing and think about what that means and learn the tradition that's really associated? If it's tefillin, do you meditate on the whole being of what you're doing? Every time you have a mitzvah you like to do, have you ever figured out how to do it the best? And if you learn to do something the best, you learn something about yourself. You connect your inner will to your outer will. And that is really the great moment. When my grandfather, blessed memory, Rabbi David Edelman, and I got to spend some time going around together, giving out matzah to people, one of the stories that he got to share with me that I found truly amazing was that he said when he first came to Chabad, there was a previous Chabad Rebbe, and his son-in-law, who wasn't the Rebbe yet at the time, And his son-in-law, the Rebbe, the future Rebbe, was very kind to the American boys. There were only a few people speaking English in the synagogue every day. Everybody was coming from Russia and Eastern Europe at the time. We're talking about in the late 40s. And my grandfather said that one time the Rebbe walked up to him, the future Rebbe, and he said, you want to hear something that just went on in the Rebbe's office? I'm like, yeah, oh yeah, sure. And he said, there, I saw a guy walk into synagogue who was not a religious Jew, and I said, would you like to put on tefillin? Maybe you want to eat something, make a blessing. You know, I tried to bring him in. And there were some people there who were like, why are you being so nice to the guy? He's a not religious Jew. Tell him, you're not complete. You got to go do this and that, and you have to keep Shabbat, and all these things you got to do. So he said, I was perplexed. What's the right? Am I just being nice? But am I right? So I went into my father-in-law's office, and I went to him and I said, what's the right path? And he told me, it's hot off the press, telling my grandfather. And he told me that up until now, the way to get somebody in was through discipline. Interestingly enough, when somebody was coming, if you were already showing up to the rabbi or the synagogue, you wanted the rabbi to say, you're not doing enough, you're not trying hard enough, you're not contributing enough, you're not dedicated enough. But today and for the future, the only way to conquer this world is through love and telling people what you did is amazing, do more and do more. In other words, positive reinforcement and encouragement. So a person does one mitzvah, say it's the greatest mitzvah they've ever done. And the mitzvah is the connection. That'll bind them to everything. Because as we started off with, behind everything is a singular force. And being able to tap into that singular force allows all of your hopes and dreams to be accentuated and truly become what you need to be. So this is what we really need to do, is find our mitzvah, find our connection, find our ability to connect our inner desires with our outer living experience, and truly figure out how much more I can do in this world. Am I leaving myself inside, or am I really going out there and really singing my song and being the individual I'm capable of being? So I hope this gives you some food for thought and some ideas to think about in maximizing who you are. Nobody is more attractive than when they're living up to their potential. You want a good, great partner in life? You want to have a really successful life? Be the most attractive person you could be. And the only way to do that is if you learn to identify who you are. And tonight's tool is find a mitzvah and make it yours. Be the best mitzvah man and mitzvah woman in that particular area you could possibly be. L'chaim to you. I look forward to seeing you next week and continuing this conversation.